Oh, hello again. This is politically incorrect old white guy. Uh, and I was planning to talk about gun control measures in this next segment, but there have been some interesting events recently that kind of fold into our theme here. So I'm going to address those today, and we'll do the gun control thing some other time. So the big event I'm referring to, of course, is the California wildfires that are still burning after more than a week and have devastated entire neighborhoods and business districts in Los Angeles. Uh, as you probably have realized by now, I like to summarize my thoughts in pithy, short sentences, and I'm going to do that again today. The sentence that comes to mind in this case is go woke, go up in smoke. Uh, the underlying problem here is in an area or district that is prone to these types of fires where the high winds are a regular occurrence at this time of the year. You have an administration, a local government that has lost sight of their fundamental role as government and have fallen into the same trap that many uh, government entities have fallen into, which is this ideology trap where they believe their role is to teach us what to think, what to say, and what not to say, and to implement this diversity, equity, inclusion ideology rather than to take out the garbage or do whatever their primary function is, which now has come at a huge cost. We saw something similar in the case of the hurricanes in North Carolina, the floods rather that were caused by the hurricane. That is a little different in that the hurricane per se was not caused or traceable to a lack of action or maintenance on the part of any government. That was just a natural disaster. However, the reaction by FEMA was politically slanted, ineffective, and a massive failure. This California situation is directly attributable to lack uh, maintenance of the forest and brush around these built up areas, which is a legitimate government function and has been neglected in the name of environmental correctness and of course diversion of funds from doing maintenance of the forest to seminars on white supremacy or white privilege, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You just have to look at the characters involved and you will understand exactly what's going on here. The interesting thing is, I've stated many times that government will fail you, and here's another daring example. But the interesting thing about this situation is it's local government that's failed, not federal government, not central government, not even state government as much as local government. And I've advocated for the devolution of more and more functions to local government and by the centralized governments, and of course, privatization where possible, wherever possible. Um, what you see happening now reinforces my assertion that if you need government, it's better to have it the function at the local level. There is an immediate and loud call for the officials concerned to step down. In the case of North Carolina with FEMA, a few people in North Carolina are not going to bring about a change in Washington, D.C. But in this case, in California, the people affected can directly bring about change in California because they constitute most, if not all, of the voters that put these people in office. And they can throw them out, which they are in the process of doing, and I'm no doubt will do, and common sense will return. So that's the big subject for today, the big government failure. And conclusions that I at least draw from that situation. I have, on a minor scale, a second example I want to share with you this time. This time in terms of dealing with the federal government, and in particular the federal, in case it's the Transportation Security Administration, TSA, which has now stuck their nose into the FAA's business. As a result of the World Trade Center attack, the government decided that they should more thoroughly vet any foreigner who wants to learn how to fly an airplane. Well, that would include, of course, a few terrorists, but for the most part, it includes people like me that want to learn how to fly a light aircraft for sport or business or pleasure. And as a consequence, we now all have to go through, I'm a Canadian citizen, so I'm on the suspect list, I guess, and I had to go through TSA screening before I could get training. And that entailed filling out a form, of course, paying a bunch of money, and then I had to drive 160 odd miles to Fort Worth with my passport to present that to a designated person whose main job it was to make sure that the name on the application corresponded to the name in the passport and to the photograph in the passport, and to take a photograph of me to make sure that all these people were the one and the same, and that I wasn't Ahmed someone or other masquerading as as a aspiring pilot and trying to get flight training so I could crash my plane into something or somebody. Well, I did all that, and the irony or the joke was, when I went to have my photograph taken and the person was supposed to verify that I was who I said I was, she did not even look at the picture in my passport and compare it to anything. All she did was take a picture of me, take a photocopy of my passport, take my money, and thank you very much. Out the door I went. So on that basis, I was permitted, after some more red tape, to commence training with a certified flight instructor. And unfortunately, that gentleman, when he applied or when he went on the TSA website to close that loop, he put the start date and the end date of the training as the same day. I think that's what happened, because that's how the system registered the training session. So the training session never really got going in the TSA sense anyway. It expired the day it started. So I then tried to get that rectified. I went online, there's no way to do it. So I sent them an email saying, listen up, my training, you're showing that my training event is completed. In fact, it has not completed. This was a snafu, I need the dates amended. I sent that email about 2-3 weeks ago now, and I'm wondering why I haven't heard from them. So I go on the website and I read this. Currently, FTSP help desk emails are being responded to within 30 calendar days. So it takes them 30 days to respond to a simple email inquiry. That's mind-boggling, and just another example of government service being, shall I say, less than what one pays for. In this case, not only do I pay a substantial amount of federal taxes, but I also have to pay $140, I believe it was, for the original application to be approved. And yeah, I didn't get anything for my money, and I'm still waiting their response. So that is my small example of government ineptitude or failure, this time on the federal level. And I wanted to throw that on the pile while we were on the subject. My frustration of the day. So let's talk about something else as well. Biden administration, I don't believe this was Biden's personal initiative. It's this legion of nameless people behind him that are all on the Marxist playbook, and they just get him to sign stuff. Biden, one of the things he signed was a ban on any oil drilling in federal waters off any exploration, let alone drilling. Exploration can be done seismically off the East Coast, and I think it's 650 million acres of potential oil reserves that he just put off limits. In contrast, we have Norway. I've talked about Norway in the past. And let's see what Norway did pretty much the same week as Biden pulled that stunt. Here in Norway, and you'll remember the discussion of Norway where they take this oil revenue and they put it in this fund, this sovereign wealth fund of theirs, which now exceeds $2 or $3 trillion, which is about $750,000 per citizen, set aside for retirement, basically, as opposed to our brilliant social security system, which is about to go bust, which was never invested in anything that yielded any kind of real return. It was just invested in government bonds, which is another way of saying the government just took the money and spent it and promised to put it back later. So Norway awards 53 offshore exploration licenses, ignoring protests from environmental groups. This is Yahoo Finance. I get a lot of news there, and it's not too bad in terms of bias. 20 different companies, and they're going to go and explore for oil and gas. I'm sure some of them will find oil and gas in the North Sea. And this will then accrue to the benefit of the Norwegian sovereign wealth fund, all the royalties and what have you. I'm sure that these licenses were paid for as well. And the Norwegians are laughing all the way to the bank while we are wringing our hands about Social Security and massive deficits and debt. Norway doesn't owe any money. They are truly self-sufficient financially. We hear a lot about how important it is for the United States to be energy independent. Well, that's fine, but if you're not financially independent, that means very little. The real security comes from being financially independent. Greta Thunberg, of course, that young woman, well, she was a teenager. I guess she's a woman now. She's, of course, blathering on about climate crisis, moral responsibility, and so on. But our irony is that she's $750,000 ahead due to the production of oil in Norway's North Sea. And I don't see her giving that up or donating that to any environmental cause. So that's an irony right there. So that was the second little tidbit I wanted to cover today. And I believe there's one more. I have advocated as a kind of best of making the best of a bad situation. I've advocated the notion that the government should privatize to the greatest extent possible, and where that's not appropriate, though, the function should be devolved, pushed down to the lower level, lower tiers of government, the state and county levels, wherever possible. So this is not a new idea. Here you have something that I found while I was nosing around on from gov.uk, the official website of the United Kingdom government, on how government works, the cabinet ministers, the prime minister, and how that all works. But the interesting thing is this notion that they've implemented of devolved government. If you don't know this, the United Kingdom is not one country. It's actually four countries: England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland. And I guess Southern Ireland belongs to England. And that caused a lot of grief for a lot of years. But the United Kingdom is the overarching government of these four countries. And one of the things that they've done to keep the countries within this union of theirs is to devolve administration on domestic policy issues to Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland as much as they can, including health. So that in our case, that would be, I suppose, Medicare, Medicaid would be the equivalent. Education, Department of Education, which I've advocated for the dissolution of the Federal Department of Education. Culture, environment, EPA. Again, we don't need the EPA at the federal level. That's a state function, more effectively at the state function. And transportation, I don't know about that one. You know, there's so much national transportation by rail, by road, and especially by air, that I'm not sure that the states can effectively manage that on their own. There has to be some level of federal involvement. The FAA, you know, for example, which would treat aircraft transportation and travel as a federal national issue, not a state issue. There's some role, I guess, for the states in even the counties. The little airport that I use is a county that's administered by is an airport that's administered by, and I think owned by, the county. And I pay my hangar fees to the county. When I purchase fuel, I pay for the fuel, and the money goes to the county. So it's effectively like a little business that's run by the county. And yeah, if I have a problem, I know where to go. It's not very far to go down to the county office and talk to them there if I want to rent a hangar or whatever. So that's how the UK is structured, and I'm advocating for more of that in the United States. Less federal, more state and local, and to avoid replicating everything 50 times, I've advocated for the establishment of 10 super states. And then the next level would be, again, counties, but again, larger than the counties we have right now, which were established back when we rode around on horseback. So I'm thinking something like 500. I believe the number was about 500 counties instead of 3,000 or 4,000 that I threw out there just as a starter, a thought-provoking number. And then states, around 10 states instead of 50. And then congressional districts, 100, that's plenty. Rather than, so we would cut down substantially on the number of people in federal government, number of representatives. And the logic behind that is every one of them costs money in terms of office space, staff, and more importantly, earmarks or pork. Every one of these people has a power of a vote, and more often than not, in order to get them to vote for something, you've got to give them something in the form of pork, which they want to see in the bill. So if you want my vote on your bill, you need to put in there that I get money for my pet cause, which is usually just a vote-getting scheme and not something that's in the general interest of the nation or even the locality in some cases. So that's I'm just kind of rehashing opinions that I've expressed previously. And the more I think about it, the more convinced I am that this is the way to go. I'm hoping these Doge people uh, come to the same conclusion. Um, I've already heard them talk about getting rid of certain federal functions or departments, such as the Department of Education, Energy, etc. So, that has to go somewhere back to the states, I guess. I haven't heard them voice an opinion that we need to rationalize by reducing the number of states from 50 to 10. Um, but I have heard them talk about taking over Canada. Well, not them, but Trump, I guess. And while I think that's a bit of a impractical notion, um, I'm actually a Canadian citizen, so I have relatives up there, and speaking to them, they all basically say they're going to dust off their guns, whatever their guns they're still allowed to own up there, and they'll fight if they have to retain their independence. Now that's just loose speak, but they feel strongly that and patriotically that Canada needs to retain its identity. Well, Canada could retain its identity under this notion of devolved government, just like the UK. We could, in addition to the 10 states in the US that were largely self-administering and self-governing, apart from defense and foreign policy and some other important federal level issues, some or all of the Canadian states could, fold right in under that notion, and we could have, instead of 10, maybe 15 states. You're never going to get the French to agree with the British states in Canada, so it would have to be Quebec and maybe those little insignificant Nova Scotia and New Brunswick folded in under them would be one. The western part of Canada, and then the Midwest, Saskatchewan or what have you, Alberta, and then maybe Ontario and which is where most of the industrial activity is, could fold in, or maybe that could fold under New York and New England, become part of that super state. I think that idea has some merit just in terms of sheer efficiency, in terms of relieving the tax burden not only on our citizens but on the Canadian citizens. And then we would have a shared defense. The Department of Defense would be an umbrella that covered Canada and the United States. So I think it's got some merit. Whether it'll ever happen, I doubt. But certainly under the existing situation where we want to make them one state, that's never going to happen. Forget it. The French and English-speaking Canadians are not going to fold under the United States as one state. Forget that. That's just impractical and naive. I'm not sure what Trump really, he plays this negotiating game where he puts some outlandish demand out there and then he settles for something less. I'm not sure exactly what he wants there. It's got to do with national security, and I guess the North is called the Northeast Passage, which is becoming a viable sea route now with the less icing in that part of the world. So, he doesn't want the Soviets submarines nosing around in that part of the world. And he doesn't want the Chinese using that for a trade route. So, the more control we have over Canada from that perspective, national security perspective, the better. All right, well, that's pretty much, I believe, all I wanted to cover today. And as usual, I wish you a government-free day, and thank you for your time.